Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto x Glynda x Salem x Calavera? The movie. Huge shout out to NeonZangetsu for this story. If you want more awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. It was a good hunt. Naruto took particular pride in his prize today, not just the buck he brought down, but the sheer size of the beast, its weight, antlers, everything about his quarry made for a worthy foe and a hearty meal. It had taken him days to hunt the damn thing, leading him on a merry chase through the wintry wilderness before he finally cornered it and brought it down. Not with any fancy jutsu on his part, nor explosive attacks, though he could have used either just him, his prey, and a single arrow knocked to the string of his bow. One shot. One kill. One victory. It felt good. Now the deer decorated his shoulders, slung over his back like the trophy it was. But it was a good weight. The weight of progress. Triumph. Hard work and progress made with nothing more than the strength of his hands and his alone. Even if those hands were little older these days. Nevertheless, he kept moving. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he plodded onward, continuing the long trek home. Steam fogged the air before him as he exhaled, keen eyes fixed firmly upon the horizon and a distant plume of pale smoke therein. He would eat well tonight. Kurama would have been proud. Even this late in winter, it heartened him to know that there was still game to be had without rousing a bear from its den. He had food aplenty already, more than enough to last the months ahead, but it was always good to keep one's skills sharp, and this had proven to be a long winter indeed. Longer than he would have liked, really. Folks down in the village were starting to call it unnatural, the wrath of heavens, a curse from the gods, a sign of their displeasure. Unlikely. A low, resonant voice rang out amidst his thoughts. Gods wouldn't stoop to such petty acts. You think so? He muttered under his breath, expelling another plume of steam. Could be. Ever since he'd first found himself in this world, he had heard it. The voice. Always there, ever present. He didn't know who or what it was, only that it seemed to be an ally, one that wished to help him. It was no Kurama, but it helped to fill the void he'd left behind. Or maybe it was just a sign of his own budding insanity. Who could say? Honestly, apparently the voice in his head was feeling chatty today, because it kept rambling on. People these days are so hung up on the most curious aspects of life. Why would gods make their displeasure know through the weather? Naruto grunted and rolled his shoulder to adjust his burden. Can't tell you. We didn't really have gods like you in my world. The only one I knew killed me, then my world. I am sorry for that. He shrugged. Like I said before, it's fine. I'm over it. Taking pity on the voice, Naruto decided to throw it a bone. Look, he said at length as he skirted a fallen tree weighed down by snow, humans are often weak because of what they refuse to be, vulnerable, honest, humble, and accountable. We fear what we don't understand, and some people prefer to let their fear become blame, and they lay that blame at the feet of what they call the divine. I have begun to understand that. He walked in silence for nearly a minute before a thought occurred to him. So, assuming you're real and not a figment of my imagination, Naruto wiped a bead of cold sweat from his brow and turned his gaze toward the overcast sky. Don't suppose you could magic me up some sunshine? I cannot. Worth a try. Naruto didn't mind the oncoming storm, didn't much care either. Food was food. A hunt was a hunt. A hunter must hunt. He kept walking, focusing on the smoke of the chimney to the north, kept moving, and gradually the steady crunch of snow beneath his boots drowned out all unnecessary thoughts. He let himself fall into a comfortable routine, idly circulating chakra throughout his aching muscles to keep them fresh. This was a modest life he'd managed to make for himself, maybe even a meager one, but it was his and that mattered. It was free. It was peaceful. It was quiet. This was the life he'd been promised, and despite the occasionally chatty voice in his ear, it wasn't a bad one. On your left. Naruto paused with an impatient sigh. He'd already sensed the intruder long before the voice spoke. No, that wasn't right. In many ways he was the intruder here. Any man trying to make a living for himself way out here in the outskirts could be considered such when it came to Mother Nature. Sure enough, something stirred in the undergrowth behind him a heartbeat later, causing him to pause and look back. The snout of a bristling beast emerged from a snow-laden bush, revealing a mangy-looking gray wolf. Not a Grimm, he realized after a moment's pause, just a harmless beast. Well, harmless to him at any rate. As he looked on in quiet consternation, it planted its paws and kept its head low to growl at him, hackles raised, bright eyes fixed upon his catch. Naruto felt the ghost of a smile touch the corner of his mouth. Hello there. You're out late. And here I thought you'd be hibernating. Most predators back down once they realize you weren't afraid of them, but this one didn't. Concerning. Don't suppose you've got a pack with you? I could use a new rug or two. No, he didn't sense anything nearby. It was alone, then. Which made its determination all the more confusing. Rolling his shoulders, he idly adjusted the carcass there, and pivoted to lay one hand upon the hunting knife at his belt. Can't let you have this, I'm afraid. I brought this buck down fair and square. Hunters gotta hunt, you know. The wolf redoubled its growl and inched towards him. He realized belatedly, as his eyes strayed to her distended stomach. That explained things. Looked like she'd have pups any day now. She must be desperate to hunt in these conditions, though he could understand her need. No food, no milk. No milk, and her babies would die. Still, he was loath to give up something he'd worked so hard to hunt. The wolf growled anew, ready to rush him and die for it if need be. It would be such a waste. Naruto snarled back, eyes pulsing white for a moment. Don't try it. The wolf backed down with a whimper. Pity kicked at his chest. Damn his blasted bleeding heart. Reaching over his shoulder, he seized one of the deer's mighty hind legs and tore it off at the haunch with his bare hands. Holding the still bleeding meat up for good measure, he watched the wolf's gaze track the meaty morsel. A whine escaped the beast, but it made no move to attack. Tossed it down at his feet. After a moment's consideration, he tore another leg loose and held that up as well. Crouching down, he hefted one of the juicy haunches toward the poor critter. Come here. The wolf didn't budge, doubtlessly fearing a trap on his part. Not that he could blame her. Just as a hunter must hunt, so too must the prey ever be wary of the hunter. Everything he was doing now flew in the face of her instincts and tradition. Small wonder she was afraid of him. That said, his patience and his generosity had their limits. His eyes glowed anew. I said, come here. The wolf inched forward, eyes fixated on the prize to the exclusion of all else. It had either given up, or was willing to risk capture to claim even a morsel of meat. He had but to wait, so he did. He remained still as stone, holding the deer's limb outward as the mother-to-be patted forward. He saw the moment desperation gave way to ravening hunger. The wolf pounced with a snarl, her jaws seizing upon the leg with feral ferocity. The meat was torn from his grasp in an instant, flung to the floor and hastily devoured. Naruto allowed it with a weary smile, idly reaching down to run a soothing hand across the creature's bony back while she was distracted. He could feel her spine through her mangy fur and sense a whole host of other problems besides. That wouldn't do. His right palm glowed gold, imparting a touch of his own vitality in its wake. The wolf jolted in surprise, but didn't stop eating. It didn't dare for fear of losing what it doubtlessly believed would be its last meal. That gave him the opportunity to complete his work. He mended her malnutrition, boosted her immune system, fixed a limp in her hind leg, then made sure her unborn pups would be healthy. She was carrying a whole litter. Good for her. This old forest could use some life. Belatedly, he realized the wolf was looking up at him, having finished her food, placid as a bunny rabbit. He scratched her once behind the ears, unable to help himself. There's a good girl. So speaking, offered the remaining haunch of meat to her. You need to save this one, alright? Make it last. For your pups. She took it between her teeth, but didn't devour it as she had the last. Her tail swayed once in what he hoped was understanding. He very much doubted she understood his words, but hopefully she recognized the sentiment. I've done all I can for you. He made a shooing gesture with his off hand. Back to your den now. Get. He needn't tell her twice. Prize and jaw, the beast bolted away into the underbrush. Kind of you. Was it? He doubted he'd ever see her again. It was a whim, nothing more. Rather than retort, Naruto grunted as he climbed back to his feet, idly turning his gaze toward the horizon. It had begun to snow. Echoing that very thought, a bitter breeze picked up, lashing at him through his heavy winter coat. He shivered a bit despite himself, gloves rubbing together in a vain attempt to preserve warmth. Winds howling. From there it was a relatively short trek back to his cabin. He knew he'd found the hidden path when he came to a pair of overgrown trees rimmed by thick thorn bushes. He forced his way through, uncaring as the briars tugged at both his catch and his jacket but failed to find purchase on his aura. In short order, he was through. Trudging up the short steps to his home, he paused to squint up at the falling flecks of ice, frowning a little at the overcast skies and the mountains beyond. What had begun as flurries this morning had already resolved into a steady snowfall by the time he'd returned. A storm was moving in. Might have to clear off the roof again before nightfall. Wouldn't do to have it collapse on him. Again. He still remembered the last time he'd awoken to find his portion of the house and himself crushed by wooden logs. That had been a particularly embarrassing moment on his part. He wasn't seriously hurt, but was still left with a lump on his head and feeling like a fool for his faults. She had laughed at him when she found him the next morning, giggled really while she pointed at his plight. I told you that roof wasn't stable. Gods, you really are hopeless when it comes to building a house, aren't you? It's too funny. Guess I'll have to help out. Count yourself lucky, Whiskers. The greatest huntress in all of Remnant will lend you a hand. He still heard her laughter sometimes in the silence when he stopped to listen. Saw her when he closed his eyes. Even now she was realer than the day she'd left. Would you look at that? Snug as a bug in a rug. Told you we could do it, and to think, it only took us 9 months. Best 9 months of his life by far, bar none. He remembered them fondly to this day. My work here is done. Be seein' ya. Don't be a stranger, now. Hopefully she was doing well these days. Oh. I almost forgot. My name is... A rueful smile tugged at his lips as he swung the door open, tilted his shoulders to slip under the arch with his meal in hand, and ducked inside. Nowadays his humble home was a cozy little cabin, all things considered. He built it from scratch, rebuilt it, then torn it down and built it back up yet again when he wasn't satisfied with the result. Each time he gradually added more to it, made improvements as time went by. A carefully prepared fire burned in the hearth within, warming his bones while its smoke funneled up the chimney. I'm home. He sighed into the silence. No one greeted him in return. Naturally. Stomping his feet on a firm mat at the door, he carefully cleared them of excess snow. He turned to set his catch down on a bloody table near the door. He'd skin that later, but for now he wanted to freshen up. Shucking off his coat onto a crude wooden hook to dry, he approached the fire. A smaller table awaited him there, bearing a wooden basin of water. Removing his thick gloves, he dipped his hands within, and began to wash his face. Splashing warm water on his whiskered visage and the blood off it, he soon felt himself refreshed again. He took a moment to stare at himself in the water, and the reflection therein. Silver eyes stared back at him within the basin. He sighed. Dang. Still there. Not sure why I'm surprised anymore. Even now, despite his best efforts, he stopped short at the sight of them. He wasn't at all used to his new eyes. They startled him sometimes, even years after his rebirth. He had blue eyes in his last life, not these shining windows into his soul. Still, he was grateful for them. Better to have strange eyes he didn't understand than no eyes at all. Living blind was a terrible thing. He'd experienced that horror once in his last life and had no desire to ever relive it again. Shaking his head, he began to dry his face with a rough towel. No rest for the weary just yet. He had to take his catch out back and skin it, prepare it, then cook it. Raw meat didn't agree with him, so he had best make sure he didn't louse it up this time. Something stirred behind him in shadows of the door. The voice in his head had gone quiet. He wondered why. There was no time to consider it. Naruto paused. Sniffed once. Frowned now as a familiar scene reached his nose. I know the smell of a rotting corpse. He. Guilty as charged. A merry laugh answered from the dark. Here, catch. He almost tensed, nearly expecting a knife in the back, but it never came. A dull thump behind him heralded the arrival of. Ah. So that was how they wanted to play. Gazing down, he found a broken body lying at his feet. A young woman by the look of her, hair dark and skin tan, body wrapped in a green winter cloak. Probably from the little hamlet down south. No one he recognized. But that wasn't what gave him pause. Someone had gouged her eyes out with a knife. He recognized the signs. It looked like she'd died screaming. Poor thing. At length, he looked up. Is there a particular reason you brought a dear girl into my home? Pearly white teeth flashed in the gloom as his guests refused to reveal themselves. Since you're so fond of collecting corpses, I thought I'd bring my own. Intimidation. Fear. Anger. His would-be assailant was trying to provoke him, unsettle him, drive him to attack. Clever, but pointless. He'd grown from that naive, reckless boy into a young man far calmer than before, one not so easily prone to overreaction. I don't collect corpses, he said at length. I hunt. His guest clapped like a gleeful child. Ah, but I do as well. You do nothing well, came the correction. I hunt animals for food. You hunt people for sport. We are not the same. Aren't we? His assailant stepped out the shadows with a merry titter, revealing himself at long last. The way I see it, we're both in the same line of, well, let's call it work. In short order he found himself face to face with a cloaked fellow in his 30s. The stranger gazed at him with gold eyes, his long dark brown hair worn in a ponytail braided to resemble a scorpion's tail, mouth set in a manic grin. But I don't need this anymore. Casting aside his hood with a flourish, he revealed himself in all his grisly glory. His chest was crisscrossed with prominent scars and he wore a two-tone dark brown, short-sleeved duster jacket worn open at the front. Beneath that he wore a white sleeveless jacket, left open to expose his bare chest, and white pants. Over his jacket were two buckled dark gray leather suspenders supporting a black cummerbund, with a third strap running across his chest perpendicular to the suspenders and joining with them on his back. There was also a dark brown leather belt slanted across his hips. His arms were covered with cream-colored bandages and elbow-length, brown fingerless gloves with a middle finger loop. Over these were dark brown leather, laced-up vambraces capped with small, silver coutures. He also wore knee-high, dark brown leather boots with strips of black up the shins and buckled straps around the ankles, and silver pullions strapped to his knees. On each earlobe hung a silver, ring-shaped earring, with a third near the top of his left ear. But perhaps most notable of all, was the scorpion stinger protruded from his back, creaking now as he unfurled it. Was that supposed to impress him? He'd seen Faunus before. He had no idea who this guy was. In the end, it didn't change anything. The ghost of a smile touched whiskered cheeks as he gazed upon him. You're not from round these parts, are you? The man tittered merrily into one hand, gaze aglow in the gloom. Guilty as charged. How'd you guess? His own gleamed. Because both the locals and the Grimm know to stay far away from this place. It wasn't a threat, but truth. Grimm turned to stone when he glared at them, for reasons he still didn't understand. As for the locals, the last band of pugnacious punks who thought they could make an easy buck by robbing a hunter blind paid for it with their own eyes. He'd staked out their 7 skulls by the door as a warning. Most heeded it. Some didn't, like this psycho for instance. Oh, I'm shivering. The deranged faunus rubbed his hands together with a maniacal laugh. You're nothing like the others, are you? You're prepared. You knew I was coming. He stamped his feet, unable to contain his glee. You were ready. As I live and breathe. A true warrior has entered the fray. Yeah, he'd known someone was stalking him for the better part of a week now, yes, but he wasn't about to admit that. Instead, he set down his tools and pivoted to face the faunus fully. Look, buddy, you really don't want to do this. More laughter followed. Buddy? You have no idea who I am, do you? His ignorance didn't anger the faunus, far from it, he only seemed emboldened by his lack of knowledge. How thrilling! He threw his head back and barked a laugh at the ceiling. Everyone knows my name these days, but not you. Oh no, you look at me and you see no one, just another corpse left in your wake. I haven't felt like this in ages. Right, Mr. Tall, Lanky, and Creepy was clearly off his rocker. Look, you've clearly mistaken me for someone else, so why don't you just turn around and leave? Why, friend? My name is Tyrion, the man sketched shallow bow, one hand over his chest. And I'm afraid that is not possible. My assignment from Her Grace was to kill you, so that is what I must do. He giggled anew into said hand. One does not upset the queen. Queen? The hell was he on about? But the lunatic wasn't finished with him. He was still ranting on, much to his annoyance. I must say, it's been such a long time since I killed a true silver-eyed warrior. Rising from his bow, the scorpion faunus fixed him with a sly smile. The last one hardly put up a fight. His lips split in a sly sneer, sardonic and cruel. She was weak. We took her eyes and left her to rot in the wastes. Naruto went still. Last one? She? Surely he wasn't talking about her. Couldn't be. But not you. The man tittered anew, eyes gleaming with glee. You were terribly hard to find. Hazel couldn't track you down. I've spent weeks worming my way through the mountains, and even then I happened upon your humble hovel of a hut by chance. The poor fools down in that village sold you out, did you know that? They called you their silver god and sang your praises, but as soon as I started cutting, they practically fell over themselves to sell you out. Sad, isn't it? This mustn't register on an emotional level. Stay calm. Deep breaths. Naruto exhaled heavily through his nose. This ain't a hut, you know. It's a cabin. Is it, though? Tyrion snorted, rolling his eyes. Is it really? Seems to me you've been on your own for quite a while now. Have the children flown the coop? Naruto saw no need to answer. He lived in the middle of nowhere for a reason. It was peaceful. Safe. A sudden bang from the attic above caused his head to snap up. Damn his luck. A little girl poked her head down from the hatch in the ceiling, silver eyes blinking. Daddy? What's going on? Who's that? He hissed at her, already knowing it was too late. Get back inside. She yelped and did as he bid, but the damage was done. Tyrion's smile practically split his face. What's this I see? A daughter? No wonder you're hiding. He practically hopped up and down, rubbing his hands in manic glee. Happy day. My queen will be most pleased. 4 eyes for the price of 1. Have you ever had a moment where someone pushes you too far? He thought he'd lost that part of himself long ago. How wrong he was. He knew he shouldn't let this register on an emotional level, that this was a mistake, that he was doing exactly what Tyrion wanted, that he was rising to the bastard's bait. But he couldn't help himself. He'd always been emotional, even in his first life, prone to shouting fits and the like. This was different. A cold heat could be cold, simmered deep inside of him, turning his vision to a tunnel. And there, at the end of it, him. Tyrion tittered, blind to the danger. Struck a nerve, have I? He'd no idea. For an instant, just a moment, he lost control. His killing intent spiked, and the beast within came howling to the surface. Don't touch my daughter. Tyrion must have finally sensed some smidgen of annoyance on his part, because his savage smile finally faded somewhat in the face of his quiet rage. That's a fine look on your face, my friend. I think we've had enough talk now, don't you? More than enough. Naruto settled into a stance of his own, voice warping further, stomping one foot down too as he brought his right fist forward. I'm gonna stuff you back into whatever coffin you crawled out of. Tyrion's gaze changed color, shifting from gold to purple as he unfurled the wrist knives mounted on his arms. You have no idea how many coffins I've crawled out of. Naruto pivoted, firelight framing his back, lighting his silver eyes. Less than me? That's it. That's the look I wanted to see. Tyrion bounded from one foot to another and clapped his hands, veritably giggling with glee. I'm aquiver with fear. He lunged. Naruto met him halfway with a devastating haymaker. Crunch went the faunus face as his cheek dented inward, a lone tooth whistling through the air as his charge was brought to a violent halt. Momentum caught up to him an instant later and launched him backward, violently ejecting the loud lunatic back outside into the cold from which he'd come. He supposed it was too much to hope that would finish him off. The snow cushioned his fall as he landed on his back. By the time he reached the threshold, he was already getting back up. Naruto stalked down the steps after him with a sigh. Tyrion flew at him again and wound up right where he'd started, on his back in the snow. Naruto lengthened his stride, arms swaying at his sides, fingers hooking into vivid golden claws. I consider myself a good judge of humankind these days. A faint golden light began to suffuse his shoulders and face as he stomped towards him, lending his eyes an eerie glow as he spoke. Having formerly been one myself, I can definitely say there's something missing in your eyes, Tyrion Kalos. The man leered at him, tail arching over his back. And what is Theoak? His words peaked into a strangled gurgle as an uppercut barreled into his chin from below, simultaneously slamming his jaw shut on his tongue with an audible click. Shrieking in unholy pain by the blood on his lips he'd bitten deep, the flailing faunus pivoted and slammed a savage kick into his chest. Slow. Naruto accepted it, caught the ankle under one arm, then used it as leverage to drag his faunus foe in and elbow his face. Sloppy. Releasing his leg, he followed up with another 1-2-3 jab to his adversary's nose. From there, he bloodied Tyrion's twisted visage further still, deflected a follow-up slashes from his blades, diverted the next off his wrist, before flowing back onto the attack once more. Sad. A kidney punch devastated Tyrion's defenses, accompanied by a bruising backhand to the face, followed by an utterly demeaning blow to the solar plexus. All this and more laid Kalos low in an instant. The once arrogant assassin stumbled back and fell to his hands and knees in the snow. He wasn't there for long. Naruto reached down, seized him by the scuff of his neck, dragged him upright and dangled him off the ground. Silver eyes met his. That something is fear. Tyrion gurgled wetly. I fear nothing. That right there? He redoubled his grip, rendering Tyrion's response a gurgled gasp. That's your problem. Fear is one of our greatest strengths. Without fear, you'll never grow stronger, either as a person nor as a fighter. I'm sure no one's ever told you this before, so allow me to be the one to enlighten you. Without fear. He leaned forward to leer at him. This is not gonna end well for you. With a wordless smile, he tossed Tyrion into a tree. Summer Rose Uzumaki watched her father fight from the attic. Well, win, really, because Daddy never lost. Not ever. That wasn't arrogance on her part, just the truth. Dad was good. He was very good. Best there ever was. He'd been teaching her ever since she could walk, enough for her to watch and understand. And right now, she knew this Tyrion guy weird name didn't stand a chance. He was still scary though. Almost like what was the word? A blender? That was the one. Tyrion Kalos was a bloody blender of violence. Wrist blades slashing, guns blazing, tail stabbing, striking at impossibly erratic angles and moving in a way no sane man possibly should be able to without breaking their spine. Yet for all that, he couldn't touch Daddy. Summer knew this with all the surety of a child. She watched Naruto weave backwards, hands clasped behind his back, until they weren't. Crunch. A vicious backhand cracked across Kalos' face and sent him sprawling into the snow. Ouch. Looked like he'd lost another tooth. The big Mina was losing a lot of those today. At this rate he wouldn't have any left. She giggled a little at the idea of him not having any teeth, tried to distract herself from the life and death battle unfolding before her. Because you see, the laughing lunatic wouldn't stay down. No matter how many times Daddy hit him, he just kept getting back up again. She knew he felt pain. He cried out whenever Daddy hit him, but he'd only stay down for seconds at best before dragging himself upright again. The harder he hit him, the faster he moved. Something was wrong. Summer didn't know what exactly, not for certain, but she knew something was terribly, horribly wrong here. Dad loomed over Tyrion, hands planted in his pockets, face stern, breath calm. He wasn't even winded. Had enough? Tyrion cackled. Hardly. Shredding and slicing and shrieking like the lunatic he was, the flailing faunus went on the offensive again, relentlessly driving Naruto Daddy back toward the tree line. Weaving left, right, then out of sight, he slashed out with one blade, vaulted into a handstand, kicked out at Naruto's chest, stabbed at his feet with his stinger, always attacking, forcing her daddy to dodge backwards, to no avail. Away from the house, away from her, towards the shadows. Into darkness. Was she imagining things or did she see red eyes there? Something shifted in the shadows, something big. Several somethings. She wasn't seeing things. Those were Grimm. Lots of them. It's a trap. Summer scrambled down from the loft and paused at the door, heart in her throat. Yet she didn't dare venture outside or call out for fear of distracting him. One wrong move and he might get hurt or worse. And Ursa lunged out of the trees at him. Naruto reacted instantly. Planting a foot into the snow, he ducked under Tyrion's whirling blades, backhanded him away with an open palm, then pivoted to catch the beast's paw with his free hand. His brow furrowed as he glared daggers at the beast. There were no words on his part, no clever quips, just a look of pure and utter scorn. His eyes went white and light burst from them, blasting outward in a singular wave of cleansing purity. Summer cooed softly at the sight. Oh, pretty lights! Evidently the Grimm disagreed, because it screamed as the light passed over it. Kalos averted his eye and shielded his face with a pained hiss, but not Summer. She stared headlong into the light without fear. She never got tired of seeing that. Watching that blazing radiance burst forth from her father's eyes always caused something to sing in her soul. He insisted it wasn't a semblance, said it was a power they both shared, one she would one day learn to harness, just as he had. Whatever it was powerful. Because when the light cleared she found herself treated to an amazing sight as always. The Ursa had been turned to stone, as had every other Grimm behind it, 6 in all, each frozen just shy of leaping at her father. As she looked on, their now rigid bodies collapsed and crumbled into dust, leaving only black ashes behind. So cool. She couldn't wait to learn that. Remarkable. Tyrion dragged himself upright and spat blood into the snow, grinning through crimson teeth. You're not even winded. You really aren't like the others, are you? Naruto caught him by the face with his right hand, muffling his words. You talk too much. The crazy faunus giggled madly despite the palm in his face, seized Dad's wrist with both hands, and locked his legs around her father's arm. Latching on like a limpet, he held fast, holding him in place. In the same instant his tail stabbed forward into his chest. It was too close. If he got stung by that. Thunk. Tyrion's tail struck harmless wood, leaving him clutching a large wooden log. Even from here, Summer saw the bark warp as the poison seeped into it and gulped. Definitely poison. If Dad got hit by that, he'd be dead. With a demented laugh, Tyrion cast it aside. His head whipped her way, wearing a manic grin. It seems your papa's run off, little girl. But don't worry, as she looked on, that grin grew darker still. I'll take good care of you. Summer lifted her chin, set her jaw, and stared the monster masquerading as a man in the eye. My daddy won't run away. Tyrion tittered, stinger curling over his left shoulder. Is that so? And what makes you say that, child? Summer raised a finger and pointed. Because he's right behind you, dummy. The ground trembled. It was Tyrion's only warning before they erupted beneath the frenetic faunus in a sudden explosion, showering them both in snow. Tyrion pivoted to face the attack, brandishing his blades in a brutal crosscut, and cut down. Predictable. Naruto's face vanished, as did the rest of his body. In a plume of smoke, he slashed through in shadow clone. Tyrion tooted, wholly unamused. Well, that's not fair at all. Papa reappeared behind Tyrion just as she'd said he would, grabbed him by the braid and yanked, both hauling him backward and nearly breaking his neck in the same instant. Summer had time enough to hear him hiss furiously at the faunus. You're not living up to the legend, Scorpion. An angry blue sphere sparked to life in his grasp. He slammed it headlong into Tyrion's back, right in the spine. Summer never got tired of seeing the Rasengan in action. Blue was her absolute favorite color after all. It was one of the very first things she remembered. That glorious sprawling sky stretching out as far as the eye could see. Dad's technique was always so big and shiny, nothing like the small one she could make, and thrice as powerful. Tyrion definitely felt the impact of her father's technique. The spiraling sphere showed him no mercy. The instant it struck his back rocketed forward, smashed through one tree, then two, now three before gravity finally took over and sent him skidding into the snow, tearing up great skid marks in the earth as he went. He struck a rock and went still. Naruto didn't give him the chance to recover. Down he came from on high, smashing into him with a devastating axe kick. Tyrion barely got his arms up in time, blocking with both wrist blades crossed before him in the shape of an X. His weapons shattered. Broken steel flew through the air as Naruto's boots smashed through them, then his arms, followed by his chest. Aura crackled in a dull flare of purple, then he was gone, rocketing deeper into the woods. Dad stalked after his prey and Summer, unable to help herself, scrambled after him in return. She found Tyrion crouched on the ground, snarling up at her father like a wild animal. What are you? Daddy Naruto, hummed once and decked him yet again, sending the faunus stumbling into the snow. Pain is your reward for being near me. Tyrion gagged as a fist folded him up. Fate won't be your friend when I'm around. A knee smashed into Kalo's face, shattering more teeth, leaving him reeling. You can blame me for all the tragedy that follows, and your agony that abounds. Was Dad singing? It sounded like he was, one of his old lullabies that he used to hum when she was smaller. But rather than the traditional upbeat tunes she'd come to know and love, this one sounded melancholy, almost sad. Almost as though he were saying goodbye, Not to someone and definitely not to Tyrion, but to this quiet, peaceful life the two of them had enjoyed for so long. Swaying drunkenly on his feet, Tyrion threw one last wild punch. Naruto caught his arm and wrenched it down. The moment he did, the fauna struck. His stinger stabbed out again. Dad made no effort to catch it, nor did he dodge. He let it come, waiting patiently as Tyrion's tail extended to its full length, and his eyes flashed. Summer knew what would happen next. Sure enough, her father's gaze burned bright and the prehensile limb froze mid-lunge, rendered solid stone. There it was! Dad's semblance. He could turn people or parts of them if he so chose to solid stone. It only really worked when someone didn't have aura, or just plain had theirs depleted, like Tyrion did now. Paired kinda nicely with the whole silver eyes thing, you know? Like it was meant to be. Downright divine. With one glance, he could kill Grimm, and in another render someone a statue. Or in this case, cripple an opponent. Tyrion recoiled aghast, weighed down by the sudden transformation of flesh to stone, but not for long. Naruto swept a hand through the stinger, shattering it down the middle. The wailing shriek of pain that followed made Summer flinch, but Kalos' reaction didn't end there. He didn't let the pain didn't break him, on the contrary, it drove him berserk. He rounded on Papa with wild, bloodshot eyes, fingers clenched into claws. If he'd been fast before, he was blinding now, wild and savage, little more than a beast. Didn't save him. Dad took a punch to the face, turned his cheek, reached up and caught Tyrion's wrist. His eyes gleamed. You really have no fear, do you? Such a pity. Let's fix that. Even as he spoke, Summer watched Tyrion's fingers rapidly calcify, skin hardening into unfeeling rock. The weight made the fauna slump for a moment, but only just. Screaming imprecations, he lunged forward with his remaining arm and tried to claw Naruto's eyes out. Dad caught that hand by the fingers and his semblance flared anew. In an instant, flesh and bone were rendered stone, rendering Tyrion's other arm useless, slumped helplessly at his side. Summer knew what was coming next, but she couldn't look away. Naruto lashed out, shattering Tyrion's arms, one at the elbow, the other at the shoulder. Tyrion howled furiously and tried to kick him with his left leg, for all the good it did. Dad caught his heel and repeated the feat a fourth time, shattering the man's knee literally, into a dozen pieces. Tyrion limped forward with a wordless snarl and tried to bite Dad's face off, snapping at his nose with the few broken teeth he had left. Summer almost felt sorry for him, the poor faunus, in that moment. Almost. Kinda hard to feel bad for someone who wanted to pluck out your eyes. Dad could have killed him then, but he didn't. Instead, Naruto slapped an open palm against Tyrion's chest and kicked his remaining limb out from under him, unbalancing him once and for all. Bereft of any such leverage or his stinger by which to steady himself, Tyrion faltered. His leg buckled with a harsh crack, bending horribly beneath the weight of his own body. Driven down to his last knee, he slumped in the snow, wasted and gasping for air. No, she realized, not just gasping, sobbing. There's the fear. Naruto crouched down before him, hands on his knees, silver eyes colder than Arctic steel. I was wondering which would break first. Your spirit or your body? Looks like we have the answer. You! Tyrion rasped up at him, tears of maddened despair shining in his bloodshot eyes. What in Salem's name are you? No one should have that kind of power. No one! What the hell are you? Naruto struck like a king taijutsu, knocking the faunus flat onto his back. Tyrion toppled, and as he fell, Dad seized him by the face and slammed him into the ground, scattering snow in every direction. Cracks spiderwebbed outward from the impact as he dug his fingers in, holding his captive in place. You want to know what I am? Tyrion hissed out a fearful breath. Whiskered cheeks dimpled in a grim smile. Sad to say, but I'm your bad luck charm. Have you ever seen a human turn to stone? Summer had once before, when some particularly plucky bandits happened upon their cabin. Naruto did to Tyrion what he had to them, but unlike then, he wasn't quick about it. It wasn't a quick process by any means. As she looked on, the fauna's frightened face gradually began to harden into solid stone from his scalp down, dark granite overtaking flesh. Tyrion realized what was happening too late. His cries were soon muffled as Naruto brought down another palm to hold him in place. His prey panicked. Golden eyes swiveled this way and that as he thrashed about to no avail. His cries gradually grew more and more muffled as the petrification continued. As he was now, he lacked the limbs to pry Naruto's hands away, leaving his good leg flailing fitfully in the snow, all to no avail. Eventually, he stopped screaming, and all that remained was a stone statue. Naruto let him go and stood up. "Sweetie?" Summer perked up. "Yeah, Dad?" "Cover your eyes." He reared back, raised a boot, now. Summer squeaked and averted her gaze. Crunch. She didn't see the stomp, but she certainly heard it and the successive blows that followed. When she looked back, all she saw was shattered stone. There was no trace of Tyrion, only broken bits of masonry, nothing at all to suggest there had once been a person there. In a way that was better. She didn't like blood and bone and all the icky bits. Shattering a statue seemed more impersonal somehow. Not that she felt bad about his death, mind you, because she didn't. Besides, he'd wanted to pluck out her eyes. Jerk. More importantly, "You won!" She all but tackled her father, practically burying her face in his knee as she bounced up and down with glee. "You won! You won! You won! I knew you would!" Naruto patted her head, rough fingers idly tousling her dark hair, but he didn't answer. He was still tense against her, eyes sharp, back rigid as he gazed into the unmoving forest. "Daddy?" She looked up at him and looked up through his fingers, alarmed by his silence. "What's wrong?" She was still speaking when he bridled. A kunai slid out his sleeve, landed in his palm and was summarily flung into the tree lean. Something shifted in the dense branches, and for once, it wasn't a Grimm. Naruto pivoted and another knife flashed forth. This time, the faint flash of a camera lens caught her eye. On the third throw he struck true. A harsh clang reached her ears as a strange metal contraption tumbled to the ground, sparking fitfully. What was that? A drone of some sort? She enjoyed tinkering with machines, but she'd never seen anything like that. Whatever it was, it didn't last long. Papa stalked over to it and stomped down, rendering the poor thing a broken mass of sizzled circuits and pummeled propellers. Naruto struck it once, twice, thrice, then snatched up the ruined remnants and hurled them deeper into the forest for good measure. Dusting off his hands, he shook his head. Damn drone. Pivoting, he looked at her and jerked his chin toward their cabin. Pack your things. We're leaving. Summer went still. Leaving? Yes, leaving. Papa placed both hands against her back and shooed her forward, ushering her back inside. If they found us once, they'll find us again. We need to go. Summer staggered up the steps two at a time, nearly tripping over herself in her haste to clear them. Go where? He snatched up his jacket and stomped into his room to pack his own things. I don't know. Summer stumbled. It was the first time she'd ever heard him say those words. The uncertainty in his voice lent her legs speed. She dashed into her room, snatched up her backpack, and took stock of her things. There wasn't much to take: her pillow, her practice axe, her books and tools. She stuffed them into her pack one after the other, until she couldn't fit any more. So why did it feel like she was forgetting something? Wait, her cloak. Couldn't leave that behind. She plucked it from the wooden chest at the foot of her bed and withdrew the fabric almost reverently, careful not to crease the material. It was a beautiful white on the outside and an insulated red within, replete with a snug hood to keep her face warm, perfect for long journeys. The mere act of wrapping herself up in it made her feel safe and warm. It smelled like cloves and parsnips mixed with mint, just like Mom. Summer didn't really remember Mom. She only had a name, Autumn, her scent, and the faint impression of a voice. She couldn't even remember what she looked like. It had been her, and Dad too, for as long as she could recall. He didn't talk about Mom these days. Not anymore. Naruto thumped the wall with a fist as he poked his head into her room, face stern. Ready? Summer donned her hood, hefted her pack, and nodded. Ready. His expression softened. Good. Idly she noticed his own backpack, much larger than hers, heavy and laden with all sorts of things. Food, probably. Hopefully he'd packed a lot. Papa patted her head, distracting her. Where to? He paused, considering their next move. We'll head into town first. Then move on to Mistral. If it's safe, we might stay there for a bit. If not, we'll go further south. Maybe Menagerie if Mistral isn't safe. Or Vacuo, he said, casually tossing out names and places as he made plans. No one would think to look for us there. Wait, Summer's brow furrowed. When you say Mistral, do you mean city or the kingdom? His whiskered cheeks dimpled. Yes. Right. Because she'd lived in Mistral all her young life, but the main kingdom shared the same name. Kinda confusing, really. She'd never understand that. The continent was called Anima, but why name the kingdom and its main city the same? Wasn't that just a recipe for disaster? Of confusion at the very least. A thought occurred to her just then, and she perked up. If we're headed to the city, can we see Haven Academy? No. Summer pouted. Naruto stood his ground. I said no. Summer clasped her hands with a whimper. Please? Naruto wavered as a bead of sweat ran down his scarred brow. No means no. Summer sniffled, tears shining in her silver eyes. Pretty pleased with the cherry on top? Naruto folded like a house of cards and averted his eyes, unable to stand the sight of her sorrow. I'll think about it. Summer made happy summer noises and pumped a triumphant fist toward the heavens. Victory! Celebrate later. Her father pivoted and started walking. Move now. She thought he would lead her out of the house, but he stopped just before the crackling hearth and knelt inexplicably. As she looked down, he reached down and pried a floorboard loose, revealing a small space within. From there, he reached in and withdrew a small parcel wrapped in dark blue cloth beneath the floorboards. What was that? Despite her own confusion, Summer found herself scrambling over to take a peek over Papa's shoulder and peer at his prize. She expected a fancy weapon armor, perhaps maybe a necklace or even a ring. Something very valuable, downright precious. It was none of those. Rather than any awesome weapons, gold, jewels, or riches, she found herself peering at a simple headband, the black cloth worn with time. A metal plate stood stitched into the fabric, its silvery surface engraved with the swirling likeness of a leaf. As she looked on, Naruto patted it down, dusted it off, and summarily tied it around his head. Only then did he rise. He almost seemed to stand taller with it on, look younger somehow, and for a moment, it was as if all the years had fallen away. Curiosity got the better of her, and she couldn't help but give voice to the nagging question on her mind. What's that? A memory. He cinched the cloth tight, let his long blonde bangs fall over at the cloth. And a promise. That sounded cool. It's pretty. Can I have one? Naruto blinked. Have one? Her question seemed to startle him for a moment. Sure, he recovered quickly and coughed into a fist, but there could be no denying the pleased flush in his face. Someday, he promised her. When you're older and you've begun the next phase of your training. Can mine be blue? His eyes widened just so, the reaction quickly masked. It can be whatever you like. Satisfied, Summer let him take her by the hand and lead her out the house into the snow. The cold made her shiver, causing her to idly clutch her cloak close to herself. Will we ever come back? Maybe someday. It was a promise, then. She believed him wholeheartedly. Everything would be all right. And why wouldn't it be? After all, Daddy was God. Not just a god, but the god, one of the two she read about in her storybooks. She knew the signs, had seen him glow gold when he got serious, his eyes turning white when he hyperfocused. The who or where and why or what didn't matter to her. Summer didn't need to understand to believe, she just did. She was his daughter just as he was her daddy. He would never, ever lose. So she decided to look on the bright side. After all, she'd always wanted to go on a journey. Adventure. This was the best day ever. Absolutely nothing could go wrong. Tyrion has perished. Everything had gone terribly, horribly wrong. Salem looked up from her seer, red eyes narrowing as the weight of those words struck her like a slap across the face. I beg your pardon? Arthur Watts knelt before her throne, one fist planted into the floor. He kept his head bowed, careful not to make eye contact lest he anger her further. Wise of him. He was new to her service, but he'd already learned the perils of angering her. He wouldn't dare defy her. After all, he had nowhere else to go. And his wisdom was useful. Not so wise as to avoid the lash of said seer, however. With a flick of her finger, one of its many whips cracked out, slashing into the man's back in recompense for his temerity. Explain. Ma'am. Despite the pain, he knew his place and kept his gaze fixed upon the floor. As you requested, I had one of my drones follow Kalos into the mountains of Mistral to monitor his progress. What of it? She scowled. Watts waited patiently for her to wave him on. As we suspected, he encountered a silver-eyed warrior there. Salem inhaled reflexively, but her minion wasn't yet finished, and the rest of his words twisted the knife further still. A man. He had a daughter. Lovely. The silver-eyed vermin were procreating again. Would she never be rid of these infernal godkin? Salem willed the seer to settle in her lap and idly ran her fingers across its slick surface. Did he at least manage to kill the girl? He did not, my queen. All around them, the windows cracked. Watts flinched, but resolved himself to finish his report or die trying. As I said, Kalos was killed. My drone recorded his death but was discovered and destroyed soon thereafter. Salem sighed. Did he at least die well? He died screaming. Salem slumped in her throne with a petulant sigh. Kalos had been mad, yes, but he was useful. There had been no need to train him up like some of the others, in part because he was so thoroughly skilled already. His faith was strong, his loyalty absolute. He thought her a goddess nothing further from the truth, but his belief served her cause well. She had but to make a demand and the deed would be done. He'd disposed of so many threats for her, all without want of reward. Better yet, there were no ties linking him to her whatsoever, no means by which Ozma might discover him. Now he'd gone and gotten himself killed by a superior opponent, just like that other one a decade or so back. What was her name? Tick? No, Talk. That was the one. The crocodile fauness with the rare semblance. Fat load of good it did her. Calavera carved her up and left her for the crows. Such a waste. Disposable assets were so hard to find these days. Perhaps it was time to learn more of their enemy. Show me the footage. Watts winced. My queen, it is not so simple, the drone was destroyed. Salem clicked her tongue. But surely it recorded something. Her minion's shoulder slumped. It did. Show me. Watts withdrew his scroll from the folds of his coat and reluctantly presented it to her, forcing her to squint at the grainy scene upon the screen. The footage that followed left her jaw clenched and eyes wide. At first it seemed normal, but what followed, the fate that befell Tyrion, that golden glow and blazing white eyes, the ability to render his very flesh stone, just as he had with her Grimm. You cannot die. The image of a golden dragon flashed through her mind and she flinched. The scroll fell from her fingers, struck the stone floor, and skidded back to Watts. Her capable servant retrieved it with a murmured word of thanks. Not that she heard him. He could have been shouting for all it mattered and she still wouldn't have heard her. No. It couldn't be. Not after all these years. The gods were gone, never to return, and yet she was undoubtedly looking at one of them, and if not him, an avatar of his power at the very least. A swell of shadow swept across her shoulders as her magic began to flare in response to her rising emotions. No, no, no! He would ruin everything! All her schemes, all her plots, all that she had in play, everything she had done and had yet to do. Salem grit her teeth against it, and closed her eyes, to no avail. She tried to breathe, but she couldn't. Panic bloomed and her anger, her hate, slipped its leash. She surged to her feet, seized the seer in her lap and flung it to the floor, where it didn't shatter, but bounced once, tumbling away from her into the shadows. Its refusal to be destroyed irked her to no end. That was it, the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. With a shriek of frustration, she lost control, threw her head back, opened her eyes and screamed. With a ponderous crunch, the already cracked windows around her gave way and shattered from the seething shockwave of her shout. It didn't stop there. The floor fractured. Watts found himself flung across the room like a ragdoll, his back striking the doors of her chambers with a dull crackle of aura. And still Salem screamed, howling imprecations into the void. Her very tower trembled underfoot, threatening collapse if she didn't check her anger. In the grimlands below, her children screamed with her. Nevermore fled from her tower in droves. Beowulfs howled. Ursa roared at the sky as barangels beat at their chests, and still it wasn't enough. Damn! Damn the gods! Damn them all to the pit! Why had the god of light returned? Why did he have a new champion? Why? The heavens had no answers for her. Only silence. Always silence. She wasn't sure how long she screamed for. Seconds? Minutes? It felt longer. As though she'd roared until she was hoarse. Finally, she was spent. Her shoulders slumped as she doubled, little gasps of hateful wrath fleeing from her lips as her lungs heaved for breath. Hands on her knees, shaking, trembling, she grimaced against the black spots searing across her vision. She'd nearly passed out, such was her own anger. At her feet, Watts struggled to right himself and flee, a mistake on his part. It gave her something to focus on. A target. Arthur. Salem's gaze locked onto him like a heat-seeking missile, rooting him where he stood, ever word a vicious predatory purr. Contact Lionheart. Find this man. There is nothing of greater importance to secure our victory against Ozma. Whatever is needed to accomplish this goal, you will have it. He bowed hurriedly, muttered an affirmative, and made to leave. Oh, and Watts, she called out after him, when you do find this man. Salem returned to her throne and sat down, steepling her fingers beneath her chin. Her dark eyes blazed with furious bay of fire. Bring him to me. After some consideration, they chose to avoid the first town altogether. Summer Rose Uzumaki wasn't best pleased about that, mind you, but she could understand her papa's reasoning behind it. Better to abandon their cabin and venture further afield toward the forest just in case that Tyrion guy had any allies lying in wait rather than put their neighbors in danger. After all, he'd already admitted to attacking them outright. Lingering nearby would only put them in danger. Best just to move on. Didn't make it fun, however, because you see, she had something a love-hate relationship when it came to the snow. Not her fault. She couldn't help it. Honest. Snowmen, snowballs, snow angels, she usually loved them all. Not just the cold, but the brisk chill against her face, the wind in her hair, the way her breath fogged up against the window, and all the little drawings she could make on the glass therein. Shoveling the snow, though, falling in it, never mind walking through it in the middle of a blizzard. Yeah, not so much. While she had already learned the ancient art of tree and water walking with her chakra, so cool, she had still had yet to master the technique of walking upon snow without snowshoes, and today it showed in her every step. The drifts were deep, so much so that she found herself lagging behind Papa despite her best efforts to keep up. Each time, Naruto got further and further ahead of her, no matter what she did. Worse, he always slowed down and let her catch up, patiently waiting while she thrashed her way through the snow to him. It was humiliating. After the third such stop and the umpteenth offer to carry her, Summer came to a conclusion. The snow was too much so for her to walk through ordinarily. Likewise, she liked to think of herself as a big girl, and as she wasn't keen on being carried, so like any child, she made a game of it. Hup! With a grin, she channeled chakra to her snow-laden legs, bent her knees, and surged upright, leaping forward in an explosive burst of power. The result, to her at least, was like something out of an action movie. She launched herself out the snow and soared past her startled father like a lightning bolt. Result? Success. She was free. Sumner threw her head back, hood flying free as she flung up her arms and soared through the air with a whoop of pure unadulterated joy. Wee! Naruto tooted as she landed several yards ahead of him. Careful now, girl. Don't get too far ahead. We don't know what lies ahead. Summer sulked and yanked her feet free from the snow, nearly falling over in the process. Girl, girl, girl. Why did he so rarely call her by name? Did he think she was just a child? Well, she kinda was, but still. She rounded on him with her prettiest pout. I have a name. Summer. In the time it took her to finish speaking, he'd already caught up to her. Now his hand descended on her head, tussling her hair for a brief moment before tugging her hood back up and cinching it shut. You can't let anyone see your face. Crouching down before her, he laid both hands on her shoulders and gave her a gentle shake. Keep this on at all times. Why? He met her stare evenly. Because. But because why? She asked, ever so curious. Because I said so. Boo. HSSSSSS. Unfair. She stomped a foot, or tried to, but the snow made the action stiff and sloppy. Is it because of my eyes? He sighed, head drooping a little in what might have been the distant cousin to a nod, twice removed. Sharp as a tack, just like your mother. Summer preened at the praise for a moment. Mama was the best, better than all the rest, but didn't allow it to distract her. But you have the same eyes as me. Why aren't you wearing your hood? Because, his whiskered cheeks dimpled in a wry smile as he reached out to give hers a fond pinch of his own. I'm the bait. Her jaw clicked open, eyes widening within the shadows of her cowled hood as realization dawned. Oh. Naruto nodded, pleased by her understanding. Better for our enemies to focus on me rather than you. That way you'll have time to hide. Her throat closed, making it difficult to speak. Hide from what? From whoever might defeat me. Fear kicked at her heart like a wild colt, and suddenly she couldn't breathe at all. Defeat? Was he leaving her? He wasn't, right? Papa was a god. He'd never lose, not ever. Right? Summer buried that brief flicker of fear deep and crossed both arms before her chest. I can fight, too. Papa placed a brief kiss on her forehead. I know you can, Petal. But I don't want you to get hurt. His words left no room for argument, as always. Naruto sighed and rose to his feet, expelling a brief plume of steam as he went. We've lingered long enough. Let's keep moving. It was always like this, wasn't it? Well, phooey on that, she was feeling rebellious. This was her first adventure ever, and she wasn't gonna let him fight alone. Stumbling awkwardly, she dragged herself forward, already nearly up to her knees in snow, and blew a raspberry at him. Naruto tooted. Some. She lunged forward, bounding ahead of him like a rabbit with an angry snarl. He let her. One hop, then two now, followed by three. With every leap the wind stung at her face, and the snow grew deeper. Eventually her stamina began to flag and she faltered with a cough, much to her shame. No! She could do this. She was stronger now. She was healthy. Papa had said so. She was. She doubled over, coughing harshly. Blood spattered the snow. She hastily ground a boot into it, burying it deep. Railing at herself as much as her own weakness, Summer leaped again, fiercer and faster and farther than ever before. Unfortunately, she made one critical mistake. You see, thanks to her latest acceleration, she was very much airborne at the moment. Ergo, she couldn't control her trajectory. The snow rushed up to greet her like an old friend. Silver eyes bulged. Arms flailed for a handhold in the air and found none. No, wait, stop. Whump. She promptly found herself buried in a snowdrift, and got stuck with a face full of snow. A peal of panic bleated through her. Suffocating. Couldn't breathe. She gasped, flailing for the surface. Papa. Strong arms scooped her up out the snowdrift with ease and tucked her into a warm chest. She latched on without a second thought, and buried her face into his thick winter coat with a wail. The old black and orange material brought her more comfort than her own brief burst of spiteful independence had. It had been stitched and restitched countless times over the years' Mama's work, but as always the thick scent of smoke and sunlight clung to him, even now as the blizzard raged around them. She felt his healing hand on her back, and slowly but surely, the pain in her chest eased, bringing with it sweet relief. She couldn't see his face from this angle, but she did hear him sigh, felt it as low rumble against her ear from deep within his chest. What have we learned? She sniffled. Don't be reckless. Good girl. His lesson complete. Summer hadn't even realized it was one until now. Her proud papa slung her up onto the back of his shoulders. She latched onto his hair without thinking and crossed both legs around his neck for balance. A half-hearted complaint parted her lips as the last of her pride sputtered and died for the day. Ah, Pops. I can walk on my own. Not in these conditions, young lady. She slumped. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be better. She giggled into his hair. I know. She really did have the best daddy, didn't she? He never let anything stop him, get him down, not nothing nor nobody. Papa wasn't just a god, he was her hero, the hero insofar as she was concerned. If it just took one bad day to ruin someone, and you've experienced that fact yourself, then why not do absolutely everything in your power to make sure that day never arrives for anyone else? To do everything and anything to make sure everyone has a reason to smile. Such was Papa. Nothing could stop him. Speaking of which. Naruto chuckled dryly as he waded through another snowdrift, warding one hand before his face. So? Summer cinched her own hood tighter, squinted against the falling snow, then raised her voice to be heard above the raging blizzard for good measure. When do I get to learn the cool stuff? Her father chortled anew. The cool stuff? Yeah. She grinned down at him from her perch and kicked the back of her boots against his chest. You know, like spitting fire, teleportation, summoning storms. That kinda stuff. He kept walking, undaunted, placing one foot in front of the other. If I knew how to summon storms, do you really think we would be walking through a blizzard? Summer sneezed once, shivered beneath her cloak and clutched closer. All right, you've got a point there, but still. Also, how are you not cold? The cold never bothered me anyway. He shrugged his shoulders, rocking her ever so slightly as he plodded forward. Also, this cool stuff as you say will come with time. You already know the Rasengan, Shadow Clone and Substitution Jutsu. Those are the building blocks for greatness. But I only know those 3. She sulked, clutching tight to the back of his head as he bounded over a log half hidden in the snow. I want to learn more. I want to do what you do. Judging by the grimace he gave, her admission seemed to pain him. You will, Summer. You will. Why did he sound so sad when he said that? Before she could think to ask why, Naruto tensed abruptly, eyes widening a fraction of an inch. Summer sensed it as well, not someone but something, several somethings, closing on them, and fast. Craning her neck back, she looked behind her. Whatever they were, she could see the snow churning up in the distance, even through the storm. Papa? What's? Naruto threw himself into the trees with a superhuman leap that carried both of them farther and faster than anything she'd ever done alone before. The moment they found cover, he yanked her off his shoulders, tucked her into his chest, and clamped a hand over her mouth, muffling any noise she might have summoned. She didn't have a chance to protest as he threw his cloak over them, followed by a concealing jutsu for good measure, nor time to ask why. Because then she saw them. Not a minute later, a pack of Grimm came barreling through the space they'd vacated in a rush of white and black, red eyes gleaming despite the rapidly falling snow. There were so very many of them, easily more than a dozen strong, big Beowulfs and Barangels, larger than anything she'd ever seen, even the odd Ursa and Apathy amongst them. But that didn't make sense. Grimm didn't travel in packs, not like that. Certain species sometimes congregated together, sure, but not with different members of their own kind, and never like this. No, this wasn't a pack, all she realized. This was a swarm, the kind that wiped entire villages off the map. The largest of the Grimm, a heavily scarred alpha Beowulf looming head and shoulders above the rest, even on all fours, paused just as abruptly as Naruto had and began to swing its massive head to and fro in search of something. The beast was massive, nearly the size of a small house. It could have taken a great big bite out of their cabin. Or blown it down. Summer fought down a hysteric giggle. Lifting its great muzzle, the Beowulf sniffed at the air, once, twice, then thrice, as though searching for a scent. With it, the rest of the pack paused, milling about aimlessly, bereft of purpose. Not so the big guy. It looked toward the treeline, tossed its head again and growled, an awful noise rumbling in its throat. At its command, some of the lesser Grimm did the same. As the leader lurched closer, Summer realized why the beast kept swinging its head back and forth. Its left eye was scarred over, blinded by a wicked-looking hand axe lodged firmly into the side of its skull. More than that, as it drew closer, she could see other weapons planted between the thick white spikes jutting out its back. Some were even mecha-shift, by the look of them. Summer's stomach bottomed out at the sight, her enthusiasm for a fight waning as she realized what she was looking at. This thing had killed a hunter, possibly several, and survived the ordeal, and now it was searching for something. No, not something, someone. Them. Summer gulped. Her silver eyes pulsed, reacting to her emotions, her distress. No. Not now. Naruto pulled her closer into his chest and raised his free hand well past her face, fingers twitching into a one-handed seal. Golden flames flickered within his palm, ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. She didn't doubt his ability to kill the Grimm for a moment. That wasn't in question. It was the horde behind the Alpha that worried her so. Dad could kill them all, right? And protect her? At the same time? And still the lead Grimm shuffled closer, sniffing noisily, unable to see them. The storm kept it from smelling them, for now, but it was only a matter of time. Summer held her breath. Didn't dare blink. Couldn't think. Papa's eyes began to glow. Without warning, the Alpha Beowulf jerked upright with such force that its head tore through a nearby tree, violently dislodging the axe in its skull as it went. The weapon fell at its feet and lay there, forgotten in its haste. This close, Summer could see the odd hand axe properly now. It was an ancient, intricate thing with a pendant bound to its haft, some silvery thing glinting in the low light, close enough to grab if she just reached out. Her fingers twitched, she wanted it. But she didn't dare move. Not an inch. The Grimm's lone red eye almost seemed to glow brighter for a moment, passing right over her as it looked to the east intently. Then it threw its head back and howled. Summer clamped both hands over her ears to no avail. Pain flooded her skull. It was an awful sound, louder than anything, quite possibly the most horrid noise she ever heard in all her life, like 1,000 screaming voices all crying out in despair at once. Soon enough every other Grimm screamed with it, a cacophony of cries that eviscerated her ears, harrowed her heart, and sundered her soul. Mercifully it proved brief. With a yowl soon echoed by its fellows, the alpha Beowulf bounded away into the storm. 30 seconds passed, a whole minute. 2 now. 3. Finally, Naruto exhaled and let her go. Summer sagged against him, breath coming in little fitful gasps. What was that thing? An ancient Grimm. Papa pulled himself up, inadvertently dragging her with him. Very smart. Very old. Very dangerous. She squinted at him, wiping frozen tears from the edges of her eyes. Why didn't you kill it? I could have, but it would have slowed us down. More than that, we would have given our position away. Summer took his words at face value. Her eyes strayed back to the hand axe, half buried in the snow, its golden edge coated with dark ichor. Naruto saw her staring and sighed. Summer, no. Summer inched closer. But it's looked so cool. You don't know where it's been? Of course I do. A little giggle escaped her, eyes sparkling as she reached for her prize. It was wedged in the skull of that Grimm. Its owner must have been a super awesome huntress. Her at last Papa paused. What make you so certain it belonged to a huntress? She grinned at him. Gut feeling. Naruto could have stopped her, probably should have, considered it was covered in Grimm taint, but he didn't, and she loved him all the more for that. When she picked it up and turned to face him, he was already there, holding out a clean cloth from his pack to her. The command went unspoken, but she already knew what he wanted. Let me clean it first. Summer reluctantly offered it to her papa and let him work. In a matter of minutes it was cleaned of both Grimm and grime. Only then did she realize what a wonderful treasure this black-on-gold axe truly was. The long handle of the weapon was colored black, with gold metal embossed to it, forming a curved blade. Near the axe's blade was a trigger for the weapon, indicating that the other edge of the weapon likely served as a rifle of some sort. Naruto swiveled the stock around, parallel for the blade to extend, inspected the ammo cache still full and grunted once, giving it a brisk swing to lop off a nearby tree branch besides. Sundered rose. Summer perked up. Why? That's its name. He indicated a faint carving nearly the beginning of the axe blade. See? Summer squinted amidst the falling snow, and sure enough, there it was, harshly inscribed into the material with a rough hand. Still, the name and its relation tugged at her. Do you think? No, Naruto cut her to the quick, not with cruelty but kindness. Your mother's weapon wasn't an axe. She was a bit more unorthodox than that. She liked complicated weapons. Like what? In all her memories, she'd never once seen Mama's weapon. Autumn had never allowed it within her reach. Autumn's weapon was He thumbed his chin, trying to explain it properly. The best way to describe it would be a cross between a hammer and a lance fused with a rail gun. Setting the axe aside, he mimed holding something large and incredibly heavy with great gusto. It ate up ammo like nothing else, but it could blast holes in city walls and Grimm like paper mache. Summer squinted at him, eyes sparkling. What do you mean city walls? Papa laughed ruefully. I'll tell you when you're older. Oh, alright then. That was good. It meant Mom hadn't died to a Grimm like that. Couldn't have. No way. Here you go. Naruto handed Sundered Rose back to her. All clean. Can you carry it? Barely. In its weapon form, the axe was nearly as large she was. Papa had to collapse it into its rifle mode so cool, and even then it took some clever rearranging of her packs to make place for it. Summer reclaimed the battle-scarred weapon with all the respect and reverence it was due and gingerly wrapped her gloved fingers around the axe's haft. Once there, she found silver pendant carved in the shape of a rose on a mounted strap. It was affixed firmly, allowing her to glimpse her shining silver eyes and rosy cheeks therein. That settled it. She was meant to have this weapon. Sure, she might be too little to use it now, but she'd grow into it someday. Clutching her new prize close, she looked back to the rapidly retreating Grimm. They weren't headed to the town. Where are they going? Naruto's brow furrowed as he watched them recede into the distance. Nowhere good. He spoke of the other settlements, of course. Mistral had a lot, both towns and villages alike, more than Vale and Vacuo put together. Not everybody wanted to or could afford to live within safety of the city walls. And the Grimm were no doubt headed to another, very far away. Do you think whoever lives there will be okay? Papa paused for a long moment, as though listening to a voice only he could hear. At length he shook his head with a rueful chuckle and tousled her hair. I think they'll be just fine, you know. Summer tilted her head. What makes you say that? He winked playfully down at her. A little dragon told me. Besides, the city is the other way. We'd be adding days to our journey. She wrung her hands fretfully, still concerned by the people's plight. Can't you send a shadow clone, though? Papa sighed the sigh of a parent who'd endured this argument many times before. Summer. She stowed the axe and clasped both hands just shy of her lips. Just to make sure they're all right. That won't be necessary. I know for a fact that they can take care of themselves. Summer met his stare evenly, lips pursed in a pout. Naruto stared right back, hands in his pockets. Eventually, one of them yielded. 3 guess as to whom. First 2 don't count. Today was a very good day to die. Liren, not to be confused with one Liren destined to be born many years from now, wondered if today would be that day. Quite possible, really. In hindsight, perhaps that was a strange thing for a boy of 9 winters to wonder, but he was in the midst of battle, fighting as though his very life depended upon it. Because it did. For you see, Kuroyuri was under siege, just as it had been last night, and the night before. The Grimm kept coming. The hunters fought them back. Not the huntsmen and huntresses. There was a difference. That lot had all but abandoned the frontier long ago, but they had not. And slowly kept fighting. Ducking low, he effortlessly evaded a small Nevermore's grasping talons before they could sink into his hair and yank him off the village wall, pivoted and caught its spindly neck in a tight fist. It flailed furiously, buffeting him with his wings, pecking with its beak, scratching with its talons, all for naught. Each blow skittered harmlessly off his aura. Closing his eyes, Lee murmured a brisk prayer under his breath and did his duty as a Ren. May the dragon free you from this mortal coil. A quick squeeze on his part was all it took to break the beast's neck and end its life. He tried to ignore how easy it was, how brittle its bones were in his hand, just how loud its death rattle was. He did not enjoy battle, did not take pleasure in killing as most of the family did, but he accepted its necessity. Hardening his heart, he cast the Nevermore's already disintegrating corpse aside, knocked another black arrow to his bow, then let it fly at his nearest Grimm. At this range, it was impossible to miss. Sure enough, the missile flew straight and true, embedding itself in Ursa's eye. The charging beast dropped with a gurgle, and skidded forward for some yards, already dead before its body truly realized what was happening. The boy allowed himself a brief moment of pride in his kill as a hunter should, then moved on across the wall, seeking his next target. He found it in a Nuklavi lumbering toward the village gate, a ghastly fusion between horse and man, its humanoid spindly arms dragged against the cobblestones while the lowered half of its body, a smoky steed of pure darkness, made to the charge the ramparts. In another lifetime, such a beast would have been the death of him, even as a grown man. Not this one. Lee! A voice shouted further down the line. Shoot it down! Don't let it reach the walls! Drawing a heavier arrow from the quiver at his back, Lee took aim at the fell beast and drew a bead upon it. He wasn't alone. The moment he knelt, his fellow hunters moved with him, 7 shields slamming down around him to ward away any Grimm who might dare approach. He appreciated the gesture, even if it was unnecessary. The Nuklavi was already dead, it simply hadn't realized it yet. It, like so many other Grimm, were dead the moment they first approached Kuroyuri. His semblance flared to life with a hiss. Pink eyes burned godly green. Li Rin inhaled. Exhaled. Once more, he spoke the words of the dragon, the ancient phrase of his ancestor, a saying passed down since time immemorial. Ryujie waga teki wakarao. Let the dragon consume my enemies. At this command his arrow flew free from his bow, and with it, a pair of spiraling green dragons burst forth to devastate the Nuklavi and the Grimm behind it for miles before detonating explosively, taking still more of the horde with them. With their passing he felt his aura plummet as he crashed down onto his hands and knees with a grunt, momentarily winded. Sweat beaded upon his brow as he gasped for air. He had overexerted himself. He would not be able to call upon the dragon again today. He knew that, were he to look upon himself in the mirror, he would see that more of his dark hair had been bleached a shocking shade of white, and with it, a touch of his life force leached away. Such was the cost of calling upon the gods in this godless world. And, his dear friend, would call him foolish for that. She didn't understand, but how could she? She wasn't blessed as he had been. Shaving away his life was a small sacrifice to pay for the privilege of protecting Hus home. After all, he, like his father, and his father's father before him were the blood of the dragon, descended from the legendary Hanzo Shimada, he who was once chosen by the god of light himself. Their line might not be blessed with the mighty silver eyes of yore, but they were gifted in others' ways. And so too they would fight. After all, he wasn't alone, far from it. Well done indeed! A blur of green and black barreled up over the shield wall, clapped him on the back in passing, and launched itself headlong into the stragglers milling below. It caught the nearest Beowulf by the face with one hand and launched it into his fellows, sending them sprawling like so many bowling pins. Li Rin righted himself, punched the ground, and dared to peek up over the shield wall, just in time to see here a spry old man cackle as he kicked an Ursa's face in, pivoted, then stove in a Beowulf's maw with an open palm. His back and upper body were riddled with tattoos, the latter of which almost seemed to ripple in the afternoon light. Most prominent amongst them was that of a great spiraling dragon, its mighty maw coiling just above his neck. The man's visage was weathered and old, dark hair streaked through with gray alongside his wispy beard, but there was still a hint of steel in those milky red orbs yet. By contrast, his smile was that a man many years his junior, his energy near boundless. Hear me, fiends! Kuroyuri is under our protection. He planted his feet and thrust an open palm forward, grinning like a loon. Today you face Li Rin, father of Li. Cackling, the silver-eyed warrior threw himself at the surviving Grimm, intent on finishing them off. A yellow flash beat him to it. That was the only mannerism Li could think to give the entity when it appeared. A fleeting flicker of golden light in the shape of a man, there and gone again in an instant. It barreled into the Grimm flank from behind and eradicated them in the blink of an eye, leaving only smoldering black ashes in its wake. Li Rin, father! Barked an indignant laugh and placed a fist on his hip, not at all displeased by the display, far from it in fact. Well met, stranger! Who might you be? Said stranger paused, saw them, shook its head, and vanished in a plume of smoke. Lee blinked. He blinked hard. What in light's name was that? The sun was setting. Naruto made silently note of it as he trudged on through the blizzard, doggedly making a path in the snow, summer secure upon his back. As much as he might be tempted to break into a sprint, with her on his back, that just wasn't possible. The cold was already wearing her down. If started runging here and now, it might do more harm than good. Moreover, he could barely see where he was going in the first place. For all he knew, he'd run right off a cliff, and then where would they be? Still, they'd been walking for the better part of an entire day now. The sun was setting, and Summer's energy, what little she had, was noticeably flagging. They'd need to find shelter soon. But they could hardly afford to camp out in the middle of a blizzard, not in this weather. They'd lose their tents. Finding a hollow tree might work, and also might get them frozen alive. So onward he trekked. Ever onward. Always. His shadow clone's memories and that of its smashing success struck him abruptly, forcing a stumble, but he kept packer, using the trees as a windbreak against the storm. If his daughter had any more questions for him, she didn't give voice to them. She simply clung tight to his shoulders instead, head buried in the dip of his neck. Perhaps that was for the best. His mind was far from the present moment in any case. Someone had been watching his fight with Tyrion. That was alarming enough, but Grimm chasing them displaying signs of intelligence only confirmed his concerns. Sure, Summer had gotten a weapon out of it, and likely hadn't given the matter any further thought, but she was just a child. As her parent, it fell to him to ponder what that meant. The conclusions he drew were concerning. So much for this being an isolated incident. He had hoped, well, it didn't matter what his hopes were now. If one had come, then more would. No more slow, easy life. It was nice while it lasted. At least he had a name now thanks to Tyrion's final moments. Whomever this Salem was, she clearly had it out for him. I am sorry. Oh, now the voice chimed in? Naruto paused. You know something about her? There was a pause, long and lengthy, as the voice within him seemed to ponder its answer. I do. He felt his right foot caught on something in the snow as he stomped forward, and annoyed, he tore it free to keep walking. The storm wasn't letting up. If anything, it seemed even fierce than before, downright unnatural, even. He grit his teeth, brushed snow from his face, and kept walking, idly shooting a mental thread of thought to his little passenger. Spill it, then. The pause stretched into silence. You will be angry with me. His brow furrowed. Why on earth would I be angry? This is remnant, not your earth. Semantics. Out with it. Again, his foot snagged on something, and again, with dogged persistence, he kept shuffling forward into the storm. The voice withdrew for a moment at that, slightly stung, before finally responding again. She is, someone I misunderstood. Failed, you could say. I was younger back then, unable to understand just how powerfully you humans loved one another, indeed, what true love even was. That was my first failure, long before I began interceding on the behalf of mortals and blessing them with my power. Love, or rather, the inability to understand it. The voice wasn't making any sense, least of all to him. I'm afraid I don't follow. What's love got to do with this? Love has everything to do with this story, Naruto Uzumaki. Both the concept, and the lack thereof. Through you, I have recently come to understand what it is. You are not strong solely because of me, but because of them. The voice flashed an image of autumn and summer through his mind's eye, though he hardly needed the emphasis. I once thought human lives nothing more than a cruel joke. Here just long enough to know what you want, then it erodes. A muscle jumped in Naruto's jaw, but he kept walking. I was wrong. Go on. Many times have I seen men in your state throughout the years, and many times have I been in it myself. A bleak sigh trickled through his ears, utterly unbeknownst to Summer as she clung to their shared shoulders, squinting ever onward into the storm. For all our rejoice of courage and valor, nothing stains the soul more indelibly than killing. You know this, do you not? Yes. Because he knew war. Hell, he'd fought in the largest one yet during his ninja days. Never had he felt so vile than standing victorious on a battlefield. Indeed, the thrill of victory faded quickly. What lingered long after was always ugly. His foot caught something again. This time it stuck. He tore it free from the snow and the boot came away wet. He couldn't tell with what, not in the low light, but the voice kept talking, distracting him. You mortals live your lives, your brief blazes of brilliance, knowing you won't be here for long. Some seek a purpose. Others take solace in one another. You live, you learn, you love. It is how you exist. How you were made, what you were meant to be, long before my brother and I came along. Had I known in the beginning, we might not be where we are now. Perhaps I should have simply granted Salem's request that day, if only for a moment so that she could bid her goodbyes and be free. Instead, I sent her away with a calculated denial. And everything that followed was my folly, because I misunderstood her. An awful feeling rose in the pit of his stomach, threatening to swallow him whole. What did you do? It is a long story, fraught with hubris and arrogance on my part. Summer gasped suddenly, drawing his ear. Papa! Naruto stopped short. Well, that he did, too, because the blizzard had begun to thin ahead of them and the trees with it, revealing an encampment on the horizon. Against the setting sun, he belatedly glimpsed a thick plume of black, oily smoke on the horizon. Summer squeezed his cloak, little face scrunching up in confusion. Did something bad happen? She tried to squirm off his shoulders, but he wasn't having that and held her against his chest instead, cradling her in his arms as he hadn't in quite some time. It gave him a moment to think, one he needed, if only because wasn't entirely sure what this place was. It didn't look like a town or village, closer to a camp, much closer than the ones they'd avoided. He could see a wooden gate from here, manned by 2 sentries, 2 torches flickering faintly in the wind. Chances were they'd already been seen. Wasn't that lovely? Be on your guard. No need to tell him twice. His foot struck something for the umpteenth as he stepped forward, and exasperated, Naruto finally lost his patience. This time, rather than move on like any sensible person, he looked down, conjured a bit of light to his hand, and took a good long hard look at the impediment. Errors were made. In hindsight, he expected a rock. It was not a rock. There was a body in the snow. He'd nearly tripped over it. But not just any body, a small body. Frozen solid. A child. No! Summer saw it and screamed, soft voice rising in a horrified shriek. His first instinct was to shield her eyes, to cover them, and he did, but by then it was already too late. She had seen, and she was wailing against his chest, making a horrible racket. His own dread was a silent one, horror mixed with shock and the realization that he'd been tripping over corpses for the last mile or so. It was too much. Even the most hardened warrior would balk at such a situation. Plans could come later. Right now, he just wanted to get Summer away from this. Any place that threw children out to freeze in the cold was one he wanted no part of, and evidently neither did she. It was all he could do to calm her and drag her back into the darkness, away from the light, away from the torches, away from the sentries who were even now looking their way, drawn by the unholy racket his daughter was making. His own thoughts weren't of much help either. He found himself torn between equal parts sorrow and rage, unable to act on either. And then he felt the barrel of a dust pistol click against his right temple. Welcome to the Brahmin tribe. A woman's voice hissed behind them. Won't you stay for supper? So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comment section how was the story. And also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.